12. Zail met him some hours after the dinner, the necromancer's expression giving no sense of success or failure as he slipped into the captain's chambers. Only when Zail had held up his ivory dagger and turned it one complete circle did the pale figure finally announce the results of his search. An easier task than I had anticipated, clearly marked and filed in the library among other papers. In his own abode, our host apparently did not think he had to be cautious about such information. No, responded Kentrell, somewhat bitterly. He probably believes that he can trust everyone. Zael presented to him a tracing of the chart someone had made showing how to reach the caverns beneath and what routes the system of tunnels took. You can see that it's good we have this. The system is complex, almost maze-like. One could get lost down there and never find their way back. Where do you think Motzi might be? That is something I shall try to divine just before we depart, Captain. Do not leave the sorcerer's former sanctum empty-handed. I have a few more samples of his hair. I'll try to use them to find his location. It may not be exact, but should be enough for me to hazard an expert guess. Kentrell tried not to think the two of them wandering through the cavern seeking the insidious spellcaster. Will he be able to detect what you're doing? There is always the chance of that. But I have taken the utmost precaution each time, and I will do so again. The methods of my kind are much more subtle than those likely learned by such as Motzi or Sin. That has been in a great part for the sake of simple survival, for we know how most others view us. We have even learned by necessity how to move among other practitioners of the magic arts without them ever knowing we were present. You may rest assured, Gregis Motzi will not notice. The ability to fool Sin did not impress Kentrell as much as Zael perhaps thought it did, but the time to turn back had long passed. How long do we have? Such a spell as the Vizier I must cast will require many hours, even a day. But we must start as soon as they begin preparations. The necromancer glanced again at the tracing, which makes it all the better that we have this. Do not lose it, Captain. Zael stepped back as if preparing to leave, then suddenly asked, How went the dinner? Well, now did not seem the time to tell the necromancer all that had happened. Zael waited for him to elaborate, but when Kentrell remained quiet, the cloaked figure finally departed. Kentrell fell back onto his bed. He had nearly managed to fall asleep when a single tap on the door made him sit up straight, one hand already on the dagger habit caused to keep at his side. A moment later, Gorst and Alvor stepped in, both looking perturbed. What is it, Gorst? Kentrell asked, hand relaxing only slightly. Albor's got something to say. The younger mercenary clearly felt ill at ease. Captain, there's something I don't like. What's that? No one's still seen hide nor hair of Breck, and now besides him, there's two more missing. Not what Kentrell wanted to hear at any time, but even more so with the coming events. Who? Simon. Mordecai. I asked the others, and no one else seen where they were last bit. Everyone else accounted for? Gorse nodded. Kept them in. We're a little cranky about it, but it ain't too bad being stuck in here. Eh, Kentrell? The captain was certain that his face flushed, but he could hardly worry about that now. Counting Albor, that made only 7 men left besides Kentrell and Gorst. 3 missing now. I don't like that. Someone resents our being here. Inwardly, he wondered if the disappearance had anything to do with Gregis Motzi. Did the sorcerer work to eliminate his former master's new allies? What do we do now? Asked Albor. We keep this to ourselves. No one leaves the palace until I say so. There's not enough of us to go hunting the others. We'll have to consider the worst, I'm afraid. Kentrell rubbed his chin and thought. Albert, you've got charge of them. I've got something in mind I need Gorst for. Can you handle it? The younger captain, mercenary, snapped to attention. I'll see it done, Captain. Good lad. And if any of the three do return, question them carefully as to their whereabouts. We need to find out all we can. Not once did he mention saying anything to Lord Khan, and not once did Albert or Gorst suggest it. Whatever choice their captain made, they would accept. Kentrell dismissed Albert, but had his second stay. Gorst, there's something I need you to help with. But since there's a strong element of risk, I'll only accept you as a volunteer. If you don't want to go, I'll understand. The familiar grin faded. What is it, Kentrell? Captain Dumont told him, starting with Zail's astonishing revelation and what the necromancer and he had decided to do. Gorst listened quietly through it all, the dark round eyes of the giant never once leaving his commander. I'll come, he responded as soon as Kentrell had finished. Gorst, this could be more dangerous than any battlefield. The giant smiled. So? Despite some guilt at having including his friend in this possibly suicidal quest, Kentrell also felt much relieved. Having Gorst at his back made coming events seem a little more reasonable, a little more normal. This would just be another battle situation. A special mission behind enemy lines. True, the foe wielded sorcery, but they had the talents of Zail for that. The necromancer could keep Gregis Mati at bay. The two fighters would move in to strike the mortal blow. A three-pronged assault on a single enemy. A nearly perfect battle plan. Kentrell snorted at his own naive notion. It all sounded so simple when thought of in such terms, but he doubted that would turn out to be the case once reality hit. One thing he had learned early on in his career, when the battle began in earnest, all the magnificent plans for a victory went up in smoke. Waiting for the moments itself proved to be the worst of ordeals. To the captain, each minute felt like an hour, and each hour a day. If not for those interludes when a tonic could break away from the preparation Sin required, Kentrell suspected that he would have gone mad. Lord Khan's daughter and he spoke little, and when they were together, and what talk did take place, concerned more hints of the future. Half-veiled promises filled the captain's head as the enchantress herself filled his arms. Not long now, Atana whispered more than once, but so much longer than I want to wait. Fueled by such honey words, Kentrell silently swore that when it came the time, he would take Gregis Mati's head himself and present it to Atana and her father as to prove his worthiness. Surely, then Lord Khan would see him as a respected suitor. And then, at long last came the time. A different Atana met Captain Dumont. As he pretended to be cleaning his gear, she wore a chaste white robe, much akin to that of Juris Khan, and her luxurious hair had been tied tightly back into a tail. The solemn expression alone informed Kentrell why she had come dressed so. Is it to begin? He asked, his question having double meaning to him. Master Sin says that the forces are in correct alignment, and that the patterns matched to their purposes. It will still take us hours, but I must be there for all of it. I came to ask for your confidence, your belief in our success. He kissed her. You'll succeed, and I'll be there, in spirit. Thank you. She gave him a hopeful smile, and rushed off. Kentrell's own smile reversed as he understood that his quest had also now begun. Gathering his gear, he waited a few minutes to be safe, then marched out of his chambers to see Gorst and the necromancer. The giant met him in the hall, their encounter quite casual in the eyes of any guard seeing them. They spoke of stretching their legs and taking a run to keep their muscles strong, the typical routines of veteran fighters. Acting completely at ease, the pair made their way through the many halls of the palace, finally exiting the building altogether. Far beyond the protective wall surrounding the palace lay what the necromancer had revealed as the best of entrances to the caverns that honeycombed Namir. This had been the very opening that Khan's brave volunteers had utilized to carry the key to Shadow to its resting place deep below. According to Zail, the passage through which they would enter the system had no natural origin. Someone had carved into the rock until they had met up with one of the natural caverns inside. The necromancer suspected that perhaps the ancient monks had taken up the task either as a place to hide should the monastery be overwhelmed, or possibly as some part of their holy rituals. Pinchero had not cared at the time of explanation about the history of the cave, only that it existed and gave them a direct route to the underworld. However, when he initially saw the craggy mouth, his heart suddenly beat as it had not since his first battle. Only by taking a deep breath was Kentrell able to approach without revealing to Gorse his inexplicable fear. "I don't see Zail," the captain muttered. "I am here," replied one of the shadows near the narrow opening. A section of rocky mountainside suddenly fell away as the cloak of the necromancer dropped, revealing the waiting figure. "I thought it might be best to mask myself an illusion until you arrived." Gritting his teeth, Kentrell pretended not to have been startled by the spellcaster's astounding appearance. "How's it look inside?" "Carved to let one man pass at a time. Your friend will have to bow his head and may find a few parts a bit tight." "Don't worry about Gorse. He'll make his own path if necessary." Turning from the two mercenaries, Zail led the way inside. As Kentrell entered, he experienced a slight sensation of the walls closing in on him, but fortunately the feeling quickly passed. Zail muttered something. A moment later, a peculiar pale light filled the shaft. In the necromancer's left hand, Kentrell saw the ivory dagger gleam. "This should go on for about 600 yards, Zail commented. "After that, the caverns should begin to open up." Gorse was indeed forced to keep his head bent much of the way, but only once did he have to squeeze through in order to continue on. As for Kentrell, he might as well have been taking a walk through a darkened hall in the palace. Even the floor had been smoothed, making footing almost perfect. Their good luck appeared to end almost where the cavern should have opened up before them. Rounding a turn, the trio at first saw not the winding mouth that they had expected, but instead a wall of rubble. "I had not counted on this," responded the necromancer. "And according to the drawing, there is no other path." Kentrell went up to investigate the wall of rock and dirt, putting a few good-sized stones. The vast pile suddenly rolled toward him, burrowing his legs up to the tops of his boots. In a matter of only seconds, Gorse pulled him back before he could become any more trapped. The trio stepped back quietly and waited for the dust to settle. I think I see something," Zail declared after a brief coughing fit. Sure enough, the dagger revealed a hole near the top. Borrowing the necromancer's enchanted blade, Kentrell quickly but carefully crawled up to investigate. "It opened up just wide enough, just ahead. If we can crawl through safely for a few yards, we should be clear." Gorse and Kentrell worked to make the opening bigger, while Zail held the light for them. Once that had been accomplished, the necromancer worked his way through, followed by the giant, then Kentrell. And on the other side of the collapse, they at last stood before the true beginning of the cavern complex. The chamber stretched hundreds of feet up and across, jagged limestone teeth thrust down from the ceiling, some of them 3-4 times the size of Gorse. Others burst from the floor of the vast cave, several more than a yard thick and twice that in height. Water trickled over the walls, carving niches, creating pyramid shapes everywhere, and in the process revealing bright, glittering crystals embedded in the rock face. In the light of the dagger, the cavern glistened. Kentrell looked down, and any wonder over the beauty of the chamber died as he saw what faced them. Roughly 20 yards ahead, the floor dropped off abruptly, a vertical cliff that ended in a chilling black abyss. "Down there?" Gorse cheerfully asked. Zail nodded, as he reached into the confines of his voluminous cloak. Control marveled that despite their crawling, the spellcaster looked unsold. From the cloak, Zael suddenly pulled forth a short, almost laughable length of rope. However, as the necromancer began tugging on the ends, it grew, only a foot long in the beginning. Under his effort, it stretched to twice, then 3 times more what it had been. Gorst, the pale figure called, help me with this. Handing the dagger again to Kentrel, Zael gave one end of the small rope to the larger mercenary. As the two pulled, Kentrel saw that it stretched even farther. 5 feet, 6, 8, and more. Gorst and the necromancer pulled, and each time they did, the rope gave way. But in the space of a few breaths, the party ended up with a sizable length, more than enough to begin their descent. Zael wordlessly took back the dagger. The 2 soldiers secured the astonishing rope around one of the broader stalagmites and then tested it. The necromancer, meanwhile, leaned over the edge, studying the dark depths. If the original drawing is correct, we should have more than enough room on which to land. The captain did not like the sound of that. And if it's not, then we shall find ourselves dangling over a 1,000-foot drop. Fortunately, the calculations of the nameless person who had originally charted the caverns proved to be accurate, not only with its initial descent, but with those that followed. Moving with more confidence, the trio journeyed farther and farther down into the system, guided all the while by Zael's glowing blade. At last, they came to an area where the passages leveled off. The necromancer paused to consult the tracing, not desiring to head off toward a dead end or a pit. Kentrel and Gorst, meanwhile, drew their weapons just in case. Are we on the right trail still? The captain asked of Zael. I believe so. The spell I cast before leaving for the cave did not give me an exact location, as I had hoped, but it did pinpoint matters enough for me to believe that we are very near. Be wary. Slowly they winded their way through a series of twisting passages punctuated on occasional by small, unpossessing chambers. Only once did they have any cause to halt, that being when Gorst came across a tattered water sack that they all assumed had been left by the party carrying Juriscon's creation. Zael inspected it for any clues, but found none. Then Kentrel noticed that the area ahead of them seemed slightly brighter than Zael's dagger should have been able to make it. He touched the necromancer on the arm, indicating that he should cover the enchanted blade. Despite the momentary loss of the weapon's light, the passage ahead remained illuminated. Sword at the ready, the captain proceeded, Zael and Gorst ready to back him up at the slightest sign of danger. With each step, the glow ahead increased a bit. It never truly grew bright, and even when what it illuminated, there was what had a dark quality to it. But Kentrel could definitely see better than the nearer he drew. And suddenly the party entered a wide, rounded chamber, in the midst of which, atop a reworked stalagmite, gleamed the source of the illumination. The key to Shadow. Those who had risked themselves to bring it down here had carefully chipped away at the cavern growth, creating a stone hand of sorts, in the very center of whose craggy palm the mighty black crystal pulsated quietly. Seeing no sign of danger, Kentrel moved to investigate better Lord Khan's creation. Dagger thrust forward, Zael stepped up next to him, also eager to see the magical gemstone. A face of utter horror suddenly greeted both men from a stalactite just beyond the crystal. Both mercenaries swore loudly, and even Zael muttered something under his breath. They stared in disquiet at the figure carved into the growth, a man of limestone and other minerals. He hung as if violently tied to the very stalactite from which he had been sculpted. Arms and legs had been pulled back as far as they could humanly go, seemingly bound together from behind. The expression of agony and dismay had been shaped so exquisitely that Kentrel expected the trapped figure to finish his silent cry at any moment. The artisan had managed to touch both the macabre and the human at the same time, making the sculpture even more arresting. What is that thing? Some sort of guardian, perhaps. Like the gargoyles and archangels we have seen. Why didn't he raise any alarm when we entered? The necromancer shrugged. Kenstrel stepped up to the horrific sculpture. With great care, he stretched forth his sword and tapped the figure on the chest. Nothing happened. The eyes shut in pain did not open to condemn him. The mouth did not move to bite the foolish interloper's head off. The statue remained just that, a statue. Feeling a little foolish, the captain turned back to the others. Well, if Gregis Motzi isn't around here, we'd better... A chill ran up his spine, and he saw both of his companions' gazes suddenly widen, and the focus on not on Kentrell, but rather behind him. Captain Dumont spun around. The eyes that had stayed closed even after his somewhat arrogant inspection, now did indeed glare madly at him. The already open mouth let loose what a terrible, haunting cry. All three men covered their ears as the harsh, painful sound overwhelmed all else. Over and over, the Sentinel cried, the mad scream echoing throughout the chamber and well beyond. For more than a minute, the horrific sound continued. Then, finally, the cry gradually lessened. Enough so that at last the party could lower their hands. And that was when they could finally hear the flapping of oncoming wings. A flock of bat-like forms darted into the chamber, shrieking wildly as they attacked. In the uncertain illumination, Kentrell saw small, gray, demonic shapes, no more than knee-high, and looking vaguely like reptilian men. Talons akin to those of predatory birds slashed at the trio whenever one of the creatures passed overhead, and toothy maws sought bites of their flesh. El Nefestos! Shouted the necromancer. Winged fiends! Lesser demons! But dangerous in quantity. And in quantity they had come. Kentrell quickly ran one through the torso, watching with grim satisfaction as it fell twitching to the floor. Unfortunately, in its place came 6 new and very eager ones. Nearby Gorse battered 2 with the flat of his axe, only to have another dig deep into his shoulder. The giant shouted in surprise and pain, even his muscular hide no match for the demon's razor-sharp nails. They filled the chamber, their savage cries almost as terrible as the warning by the Sentinel. The captain managed to slay 2 more, yet still felt as if he accomplished nothing. Nevertheless, he continued fighting, the only other recourse not at all attractive. One of the fiends dove past him, seeking instead Zael. Opening his vast cloak, the necromancer trapped the small demon within. A brief, muffled squeal escaped the creature. Then a pile of brown ash dropped near the spellcaster's boot. Zael released the cloak and focused on the other attackers. They must serve Gregis Motzi, Kentrell called. That thing that screamed was meant to alert him. Zael did not answer. Instead, the necromancer now shouted incomprehensible words at another group of fluttering terrors. At the same time, he drew a circle in their direction with the tip of the dagger. The winged imps had targeted. 5 in all suddenly turned away and, to Kentrell's surprise, began attacking their fellows. 2 unsuspecting fiends perished under shredding talons before others began to assault in great numbers, the traitors in their midst. In moments, the 5 ensconced demons had fallen, but not before taking 2 more with them. The imp raked the captain across the cheeks, splattering Kentrell with his own blood. The wound stung so greatly it made his eyes water, yet he managed to catch the offending demon as it flew away, impaling it. Unfortunately, even another demon seemed not to deter the massive flock. There are too many, grunted Gorst. Captain Dumont, if you and Gorst can fend them off for me for a moment for too longer, I may be able to rid ourselves of this trouble. Seeing no other option, Kentrell battled his way back to the necromancer, Gorst doing the same from the other side. As the pair shielded Zael, the cloaked mage against one spoke in the unknown language. With the dagger he drew another glowing image, this one resembling to their mercenary officer an exploding star. A haze suddenly filled the chamber, a noxious-smelling but otherwise seemingly harmless fog that rapidly spread to every corner, every crack, leaving no place untouched. Yet the haze did nothing to the trio, save to irritate their nostrils and obscure their vision some. Its effect on the winged demons proved anything but harmless. One by one, Then, by greater and greater numbers, the taloned fiends suddenly lost control. They collided with one another, crashed into the walls, even simply dropped to the floor of the chamber. Once on the ground, the savage imps shook as if the throes of madness. Gradually, their hisses and squeals became more feeble. Finally, they began to still. First a few, then more and more. Soon, all lay dead. Zarata! Called the necromancer. The haze instantly faded, leaving no trace. Zael suddenly staggered forward and would have dropped if not for Gorst's quick reflexes. The spellcaster leaned against the giant for a few seconds, then seemed to recover. Forgive me. That last took much out of me, for I had to say and control it perfectly, otherwise the effect would have been different. What do you mean? Kentrell asked. We would be lying there with the imps. Gorst kicked at a few bodies, making certain that none pretended, then took a peek down the passage from which they had come. Don't hear any more. There were quite a few attacking us. Zael joined the other mercenary near the passage. It is quite possible that we destroyed the entire flock. The giant nodded, then asked, So where's their master? That had been a question on Kentrell's mind as well. Were these creatures all that Gregus Monty had been able to send after them? Why had he not attacked with some spell while the three had been distracted? Even the most basic tactician understood the value of such a maneuver. Another thing bothered him. Turning back to the Key of Shadow, he stared at the artifact, wondering why Mopsy had not simply removed the black crystal and shattered it on the floor. While it's perhaps possible that such a deed would have required far more effort than it appeared, Juris Khan had every indication that his former friend had been a sorcerer of tremendous skill and cunning. Gregus Monty should have been able to reduce the crystal to shards. So why had he not destroyed the gemstone? Any hesitation likely had nothing to do with the key's momentary value. Although Kentrell knew of several dukes and other nobles back in western kingdoms who would have paid him enough for the stone for the mercenary to retire in wealth, one could scarcely believe that it had been created from magic. So real did it look. Still, he had heard of few stones so perfect. Each face it seemed almost a mirror. In some, the captain could see himself reflected back. In others, he could make out the vague forms of his companions or even some of the dead imps. Captain Dumont could even make out the details of the macabre Sentinel's face. Kentrell spun around, gaze fixed on the eyes of the horrific figure. All of the features of the monstrous sculpture, they showed the most precision, the most care. They were the most human. There's no need to worry about looking for Gregus Matzi, Kentrell called to the others. He's tried to will the eyes to look his way, but they did not move. I think I found him,